Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our third IRD Invest conference. As we discussed yesterday, the times we're living in are quite historic. After reaching a low point in mid-2020, the investment landscape has changed dramatically. And while the world has been thrown into the middle of an unexpected pandemic, the healthcare sector has really come into its own. We're seeing more investment dollars channeled into health than ever before to meet the evolving needs of patients. Today and tomorrow, we will hear from 5 ASX listed companies who are all in their own ways addressing evolving patient needs. My name's Jane Lowe. I'm the Managing Director of IR Department, and it's my pleasure to be your host for the conference. So each presenter will speak, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions. To do so, please type your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So starting us off today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Dr. James Garner, who's the CEO of Kazia Therapeutics. Kazia is an oncology-focused drug development company whose lead drug, Paxalisib, is being developed to treat glioblastoma, the most common and most aggressive form of primary brain cancer in adults. James is a highly experienced life sciences executive who's previously worked with companies ranging from small biotechs to multinational pharmaceutical companies such as Biogen and Takeda. His career has focused on regional and global development of new medicines from preclinical to commercialization. And he always delivers an insightful presentation. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he will have to say on today's topic. So with that, I'll now request that we start screen sharing and hand over to James to get us started. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a fantastic pleasure to be here as part of the third annual IRD Invest conference, and a really great opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing in Kazia. The theme of this meeting is addressing new needs in patient care. And I'm going to say up front that there really is no greater need in modern medicine than a disease like glioblastoma. This really is the definition of unmet patient need. And it's a disease that affects about 130,000 patients a year worldwide. So it's not as common a cancer as lung cancer or breast cancer, but still by no means a rare disease. As was mentioned in the introduction, this is the most common and the most aggressive form of brain cancer. And prognosis from diagnosis remains about 12 to 15 months. And that hasn't changed this century. So this is still a disease where we've seen almost no progress in the last 20 years. Still today, less than 3% of patients are still alive 5 years after diagnosis. And that contrasts with breast cancer, a disease where we've made enormous progress, where more than 90 patients are still alive at that time point. So this is really a disease which, despite all the magnificent progress we've made in medicine over the last few decades, despite all the efforts of many researchers, many companies, we really haven't moved the needle. And this remains the standard of care for glioblastoma. This is how patients are treated almost everywhere in the world. They undergo surgery, first of all, to try and remove as much of the tumor as possible. Now, that surgery is never curative, unlike breast cancer or prostate cancer or bowel cancer, where we can sometimes remove the entire tumor if it's caught early. In brain cancer, the tumor is always diffuse and infiltrative, so surgery is only ever a palliative step. But it does help, and patients then typically undergo radiotherapy, and that helps to damp down all the little tiny deposits of tumor that are left. And then they're treated with a drug called temozolomide. And they're treated with this drug for up to 6 months, and that's used to delay the return of the tumor. Now, temozolomide is the only FDA-approved drug for newly diagnosed glioblastoma patients, and it's been around for about 20 years. It's real old-school chemotherapy. This is a drug that works by damaging your DNA. It's an absolute blunt instrument in terms of medical science, but it does work. However, it only works for 1/3 of patients. So if you're in the lucky 1/3 that are responsive, it'll extend your life by about 6 or 7 months. But for the remaining 2/3 of patients, this drug provides no meaningful benefit. It really doesn't extend life at all. And that is the unmet need in this disease. 2/3 of patients will never benefit from the only FDA-approved drug. And if you're in that 2/3 of patients, there are no other alternatives. There are no other approved drugs you could try. The national guidelines in the United States actually suggest that your best bet at that point is to consider clinical trial participation. So this is really very much the kind of disease where we're just crying out for new treatments. And that's what we're trying to do in Kazia. We're trying to develop our drug, Paxalysin, for the 2/3 of patients who will never benefit from the FDA-approved standard of care. And as we talk about this idea of unmet needs, we can really see this illustrated when we look more broadly at glioblastoma. I often like to make the contrast here with lung cancer. And in that disease, we've seen 20 new therapies approved in the last decade for lung cancer, which adds to already a formidable therapeutic toolkit. So this is a disease where we've really made a big difference in terms of the drugs we've been able to move forward. By contrast, the landscape for glioblastoma is absolutely barren. The drug I just mentioned, temozolomide, was approved over 20 years ago. There's only been one new drug that's come through since then. It's only approved for very late stage patients, not actually approved at all here in Australia or indeed in Europe. So this is a disease where really nothing has happened for over 2 decades. And that is both a challenge and an opportunity for companies like ours. It's a challenge because we need to understand why this has been so difficult, but it's an opportunity because it means this is relatively uncontested space for new drugs that come through. Now, when we think about why this has been difficult, we've really spent a lot of time in Kazia making sure that we're not just retreading old ground and making the same mistakes as previous companies. And we're really confident we bring something very new and differentiated to this disease area. The number one thing here that I would draw everybody's attention to is the ability of our drug to cross the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier is a phenomenon which normally protects the brain from chemicals and from toxins and from medicines. It keeps most things out of the brain. And most of the time, that's a very good thing indeed. But when we're trying to treat brain disease, whether it's multiple sclerosis or Alzheimer's disease or brain cancer, we need to be able to get our drug into the brain and to the target. Most cancer drugs do not get into the brain, and that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to treat this disease. Paxalisib does. It was designed to do so. It does it really well. And that alone sets the drug aside from almost everything else that's out there. And it's one of the things that really gives us a lot of confidence that we bring something new to this disease area. We bring something different. Now, the drug is part of a class of drugs called PI3K inhibitors. And realize that doesn't trip off the tongue, but the reason that I bring this up is that the PI3K inhibitor class is really well proven and well validated. There are now 5 FDA-approved PI3K inhibitors on the market, and you can see them listed here. Drugs from Gilead, Bayer, Verastem, Novartis, and TG Therapeutics. And they're mainly used for blood cancers, although the Novartis product is used in breast cancer. Now, as I say, the differentiating feature for Paxalisib, the unique aspect of our drug, is that it's the only one of these drugs that can cross the blood-brain barrier. And the reason I really bring this up is when we think about answering unmet patient need, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be reinventing the wheel. We have to be coming up with completely novel science. We have to be doing something that nobody's ever done before. Often progress for patients really consists in building a better mousetrap. It consists in finding new ways to use existing proven technologies. And that's really what we're doing here. We've got something that's very well proven, very well validated, very well understood, part of mainstream cancer treatment, but with this unique feature of being able to get into the brain and therefore being able to treat brain cancer. And this is what we're seeing. Fundamentally, we can talk endlessly about all our aspirations and all our potential, but at the end of the day, what brings benefit to patients is data, positive data that shows the benefit of the drug. And this is the most recent data for Paxalisib. This was presented at the Society for Neuro-Oncology annual meeting in November of last year. And we're looking at two measures here. Progression-free survival on the left-hand side of the chart is a measure of the ability of the drug to delay growth of the tumor. And then on the right side, overall survival, as the name suggests, is a measure of the ability of the drug to extend life. And on both of these metrics, Paxalisib appears to be very, very superior to temozolomide, the existing standard of care, the drug that I described earlier. Now, this is still a smaller early stage study, but it really gives us a very powerful signal that the drug is working. And really, that's exactly what we're looking for at this stage with drugs development. We want these signals to give us the confidence to move forward into further development. And this looks extremely promising in this very, very difficult disease area. And the flip side to efficacy is always safety. When we think about a new drug, it's one thing for the drug to be efficacious against the tumor, but obviously we also have to make sure that it's not unbearably toxic for the patient. And this is a list of all the side effects we've seen so far with Paxalisib. And I want to caveat this by saying that in any cancer study, we see these long laundry lists of side effects, and many of them are actually due to the disease or due to underlying aspects of the patient rather than the drug. But there are three things on here that are definitely Paxalisib side effects. One of them is rash. So some of these patients do get a sort of pink blotchy rash. For most of them, it's not even itchy, but sometimes it's, the cosmetic aspect is unwelcome. Stomatitis is mouth ulcers, and we do get a little bit of that. We can treat it really well with a steroid mouth rinse, controls it beautifully, but that's something that we do see for some of our patients. And then third, hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. Our drug will push up patients' blood sugar in some cases. Usually that's just an incidental lab finding, but occasionally we have to give them some treatment just to control that. But by the standards of a drug in advanced cancer, these are pretty manageable side effects. These are really very, very modest toxicities to deal with. This is not a drug that shuts down bone marrow. It's not a drug that makes people uncontrollably nauseous. It doesn't make the hair fall out or any of those horrible things. This is a drug that in some cases patients have been taking for 1, even 2 years now without any real concerns. So always when we think about answering patients' needs, we have to think about both the safety and the tolerability of the drug. And with a drug with this kind of profile and this kind of unique opportunity in brain cancer, it really lends itself to use in a wide range of illnesses. So although our focus has been on glioblastoma, we have trials going on now in a whole range of other brain cancers. DIPG, a childhood brain cancer that's really just an absolutely devastating disease. Primary CNS lymphoma and brain metastases, that is cancer that spreads to the brain from elsewhere in the body. And again, when we think about how we can benefit one group of patients, it really segues very neatly into how we can broaden the use of the drug, broaden its opportunity, and broaden the range of patients who can benefit from its treatment. So we now have these 9 ongoing clinical trials with Paxalisib, all at some of the top cancer hospitals in the world, and all exploring the drug in slightly different permutations, slightly different use cases, to understand how we can bring benefit to the broadest range of patients with brain cancer. I want to just touch a little bit now on our phase 3 study, because this drug is now in phase 3. And for the veteran life sciences investors on the call, you'll recall that there are normally 3 phases in the clinical development of a drug: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We are in the end game here. We're in phase 3 development. This started back in January of this year. We estimate it's probably something like a 2.5-year exercise, give or take a little bit. So this positions us now to being potentially within a couple of years of final data that we would then use to seek FDA registration. The study we're doing is a very, very cutting edge study. It's done in collaboration with some of the top clinicians in the world in this disease area. It's been strongly endorsed by FDA, and it's actually examining several drugs in parallel. Regorafenib, a Bayer drug, is in the study alongside us, and also Valzirate, it's made by a small biotech company in the US. And this gives us an enormous efficiency in the study. It really means this is an incredibly cost-effective and efficient way to develop the drug. The study, as I say, is already 8 or 9 months up and running, so we're recruiting patients as we speak today. It's going great. It's recruiting way ahead of schedule. And so we're really excited to be part of this international exercise to try and find the next big treatment for glioblastoma. But we're also really pleased that this represents just a very, very efficient, cost-effective, pragmatic way to take our drug forward. And as we think about taking it forward, obviously glioblastoma is our primary focus, and that's usually thought of as about a $1.5 billion a year market. So it's a very substantial commercial opportunity for us. But as we think about taking the drug into other forms of brain cancer, and indeed other cancers outside of the brain, these things really just add to the commercial opportunity. And we genuinely think this is a potential blockbuster, which in pharmaceutical speak is $1 billion a year product. And we're not waiting until the final data to realize that value. We've already started to monetize Paxalysin. Earlier this year, we licensed the China rights to Simcere Pharmaceutical, one of China's top pharmaceutical companies. We realized an $11 million upfront, up to $281 million in contingent milestones and mid to high teen royalties. So fantastic deal. And of course, great to have a really, really high quality partner in China because it's a very complex environment for Western companies. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm in the interest of leaving some time for questions, I'm going to conclude there and just maybe show one last slide, which is to reflect that this is an incredibly busy time for the company. Any company that's got 9 clinical trials ongoing with a compound is going to have a lot of data. We're expecting between 3 and 5 data readouts between now and the end of the year, much more as we head into calendar 2022, and of course some important operational milestones along the way. So this is a really exciting time for Kazia. It's a busy time for the company, but a great time to share the exciting progress we've been making. So thank you very much.
Thanks, James. And with that, I'd like to now open up for Q&A. Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, do so using the Q&A function in the Zoom ribbon at the bottom of your screen. We do have a number here that have started coming through. So first one's around the Simcere deal, James. So the licensing deal with Simcere in China is very significant. Can you explain the impact of that for the company and please provide an update on how it's progressing?
Yeah, Jane, thank you. Look, it's true. This is really quite transformative for Kazia. First of all, it's brought in some good money. We got 11 million US in the upfront, and we have the potential to earn quite a few milestone payments as we move forward. So the financial impact of this is very, very far from trivial. But also the strategic value of having a partner in what is now the world's 2nd largest pharmaceutical market. And I would say, in my experience, one of the most complex and challenging, really having a company that knows the landscape tremendously well, that's incredibly valuable to us in terms of getting Paxalisib in there. And already, this relationship now is about 4 or 5 months old. It's going really well, and we're really benefiting from their assistance. But I think also there's some sort of more long-term and more abstract value to this. Partly this demonstrates the value of the asset to people. This is a completely independent company that has done deep diligence on Paxalysin and considered it worthwhile to put a lot of money on the table. And indeed, that money implicitly values the drug in a certain sense. China accounts for about 8 to 10% of the global market. So, you can do the math and work out what the deal terms say about the global opportunity for this drug. And finally, it really puts it on the radar for other partners. I think it really says, look, this is an attractive asset. There's a demand for this. And I think that's really helped to generate further partnering interest in other territories. So as I say, it's going great. We're working on getting the GBM Agile pivotal study, the phase 3 study, into China. I'm really glad we've got those guys alongside us because it's complex work, but it's coming together really well.
Right, and then a related sort of question. So Paxalysin is in a pivotal study. You've spoken about the GBM Agile study today, which means that it could be a marketed product within just a couple of years. Have you begun to think about what this looks like as a commercial product, and things like pricing, sales forecasts, etc.?
Yeah, we've started to do that work, and I would say up front, it's not a guarantee that we will be the ones to commercialize. And in fact, our assumption is we will partner the drug with a larger company to do that. And that could be one big deal with Pfizer, Lilly, Novartis, Roche, AstraZeneca, or it could be a series of transactions a bit more like the Simcyp transaction, where we just find the best partner in each geography. And we're open-minded to that. We're not in a rush to do that deal, because fundamentally, the later we wait, the more valuable the transaction's likely to be. And we really want to balance making sure we get the best value for shareholders with bringing that partner on board. But in the meantime, we've been starting to do some of the groundwork there. And I think all the signals are really positive. Just about any way you cut the market opportunity for Paxalysin, this looks like a very valuable commercial product. The threshold in the pharmaceutical industry is $1 billion a year of global sales. That's really what marks the so-called blockbusters from the also rans. And there's no question Paxalysin has that kind of potential. In terms of pricing, the average cancer drug in the United States, at least at launch, the median price is about $148,000 per annum. So that would imply about $10,000, $12,000 a month, US, more like 17,000, 18,000 in Aussie dollar terms. And we see no reason why Paxalysin shouldn't command at least that sort of price point. And we've done a little bit of primary market research that supports that. So we think this is a drug that's competitive with other cancer drugs in the global pipeline in commercial terms. And we're obviously working to make sure we realize that value in every possible way we can.
Great. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and speak a bit more on EBT-801, which you mentioned briefly in your presentation. So what does the in-licensing of EBT-801 from Evotec mean for Kazia? And can you talk more about what your plans are for that asset?
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't have a lot of time to talk about it in the presentation, but EBT-801, of course, is our second asset now. And we brought that in back in April of this year. So it's still relatively new, and we've been working through this, but it really transforms the company in an important way. One of the challenges with many small biotechs is they're fundamentally an all or nothing bet on one technology, one asset, one drug in development. It either succeeds or it fails. And if it succeeds, it can make a 10, 15x return for investors. And if it fails, unfortunately, not quite so good. And we've really worked hard to try and eliminate that binary quality to Kazia. We always aspired to have a diversified clinical stage portfolio in the asset, in the company, multiple really good quality assets, but completely independent of each other. And we've started to move towards that within licensing EBT-801. We've now got two absolutely world-class assets, completely distinct and independent from each other. And EBT-801 is going to be going into a phase 1 human trial by the end of this year. So we'll be starting to test the drug in patients by the end of this year. And I think that's a really important watershed for the company. At that point, we've got a diversified clinical stage pipeline. That really makes it a very different prospect for investors, and I think a very much richer one in broad terms.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so we're just about at time, so we might make this the last question for today. So we've seen some recent M&A activity in the cancer biotech space, such as Pfizer acquiring Trillium Therapeutics last month. Is this the sort of intended objective for Kazia?
Well, anything is possible. I think we've really just got two goals in our company. One is we believe in the drugs we're working on, and we want to see them made available to patients. You know, it really ties into the theme of this conference. We want to answer those patient needs, and we want to return value for our shareholders. We want to do whatever represents the best opportunity for the investors in the company. So in that sense, everything's on the table. I wouldn't say that a buyout is something we actively solicit. I think we really feel we can take both of these drugs forward a long way further and really build a lot more value in the business. We have no shortage of ambition and aspiration in Kazia. But certainly, if that is the outcome for the company, and if the right deal for shareholders and for patients is on the table, then we'd be all ears.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like we've got a few different options there. So with that, I'd really like to thank you very much for making time to address our theme today and in Kazia's own way. Yeah, no doubt people on this call will look forward to following Kazia's progress. So thank you, James.
Thank you, Jane. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.